Hello, everyone. Welcome to Out of Character. I'm your host, the Faulty GM. And before I get into the topic today, I just want to let you guys know that, like always, this is just my opinion, and I hope you guys can accept it as such. So, um, not before, what we're going to be talking about today is something that a lot of people have said that they've been having problem with, and that would be deities. Now, one more thing I want to say before we dive straight into how to create a deity in your game is I want to talk to you guys about the series that I'm doing. Now, this is the first part of a 3-part series that's all about how to create gods, pantheons, and how to use them, and pretty much in that exact order. So look out for the next 2 videos that I'm doing after this one. Alright, so with that being said, let's dive straight in. Now, I want to talk to you guys about the definition that I'm using for deities in this game. So the definition that I'm using is a being who possesses otherworldly or otherworldly power beyond mortal means, and has a following of worshippers that have formulated some type of religion around that individual. So I made this definition as vague as possible on purpose. And the reason I made it as vague as possible on purpose is because it can represent a lot of different things. It can represent a dragon, it can represent a person, it can represent a lot of different individuals that you would like to become gods. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Now I have 4 different steps, or 4 steps into how to create a god. The first step is to create a purpose. The second step is to create the role. The third step is to create the personality. And the last step is to name the god. Obviously, the hardest part. So, let's go back to the first step. So, the first step is to decide the purpose for your god in your game. Now, this step is strictly meta. What I mean by that is that it's something that you're supposed to do it in, like, you don't do it in game. You do it out of game before the game starts or as the game is going on. And you just want to create what you want the god to do, or what the god's purpose is in your game. So here's an example, right? Do you want your god to be summoned by evil cultists, or be the goal of the evil cultists is to summon some kind of god that is dead or dormant? Do you want this god to represent the third moon that is crashing into the earth? Do you want this god to be what the local clergy worships? Do you want this god to represent, the cleric or the paladin? If you try, so the reason that I put this step first, or put this step in here at all, is because what I find is that when I create gods, just for the sake of creating gods, I don't use them. They don't have a purpose. They're just there for, setting dressing in the background. The paladins aren't going to choose them. The clerics aren't going to choose them. None of my NPCs really worship the gods, and if they do, they don't really show it. There is no real reason for any of the gods that I typically create without a purpose to exist, other than the fact that they exist. Like, if I created a god of trees, but my story focuses on, like, the city, then there's no real reason for me to have spent, hours trying to create this goddess of trees with this really complicated backstory and all these, gnolls and orcs that follow her, but no gnolls or orcs take place in this campaign. So creating a purpose kind of instantly creates some kind of plot hooks that you can start using, and will help you as you go through the next steps. Now, the next step is to come up with the role of your god in your game. Now, if you're playing a game like Dungeons & Dragons, or playing a game like Pathfinder or Fantasy Age, or anything where there are clerics and paladins, or people who can worship a god and that god has specific aspects to them, you should look to those things. For anybody else, like science fiction or something like that, you should just create the gods that make sense for your story or for the purpose. So here's an example. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are a certain amount of dominions that a cleric can choose from. So, for example, there is life, death, light, tempest, war, knowledge, nature, or trickery. So your god should be one or more of those things. Your god just needs to have a role in the universe, right? So it could be all of those things if you're talking about a monotheistic religion, or half of those things if you're talking about a dualistic religion. Um, so again, something worth noting is that you want to keep the purpose in mind. A a group of cultists. A group of cultists trying to summon a goddess of agriculture doesn't sound as intimidating as a group of cultists trying to summon the goddess of famine. So keep the purpose in mind when you're choosing your aspects. So moving on to the personality, when you're fleshing out the personality of your god, here are some questions to kind of ask yourself about them. Um, how does your god treat their followers? How does your god treat other gods? And how does your god treat those who oppose them, go against them, or um, break their tenets? You know, in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, there's the goddess Lolith. Now, is worshipped by the Drow and some other people as well. She's extremely cruel to her followers, but she rewards loyalty and strength with power and influence. The more you worship her, the more powerful you are. So if you oppose her, however, she has turned people into monsters. She's turned them into abominations. She's had them assassinated, and then just has tortured them for all of eternity. So you don't want to go against her, but in answering a lot of the questions on how she treats her followers and how she handles those that oppose her, you can get a good sense of who Lolith is as a goddess, why she's worshipped, and why she's hated or opposed. You could also get an understanding of how good gods would feel about her. Obviously, they probably don't like her very much. So ask yourself these questions about your god and use them as a way to figure out who your god is. And again, keep the purpose in mind. As if you, for example, use the goddess of agriculture in the example above, instead of the goddess of famine, maybe the goddess of agriculture is actually an evil goddess who only or maybe a greedy goddess. You have to, do constant sacrifices. She's a demanding goddess. She wants sacrifices in gold. If you don't give her sacrifices in gold, your crops wither away because she will not help you. She only supports those who give her good sacrifices and gold. And she needs to be worshipped every day for at least 12 hours a day. So everybody so eventually people just got tired of her and killed her and blah, blah, blah. So, it's a good way to go about it if you're trying to do something unique. And just keep the purpose in mind when you're doing the personality. Obviously, if the goddess of famine is a very kind-hearted goddess of famine, then it's not really a big deal that the cultists are trying to awaken her, and it doesn't make sense that the PCs are trying to kill her. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the PCs don't know. So, getting off of that tangent, the last step is to name your god. Now, a few tips about naming your god, which you think that naming is really easy, but naming is by far my most time-consuming thing that I do. So what I normally do is I use some kind of translator into German, French, Italian, something that sounds the way I want the god's name to sound. Sometimes I use dead languages like Latin, and I take bits and pieces of words and kind of smush them together to make a really pretty thing. I use this for cities sometimes too, but it works the same way for gods. If you have the Dungeons Masters folder thing, that whatever it's called, the divider, I don't remember what it's called, but that thing has a list of pieces of names that you can roll on. That's a good way to do it too. There are random name generators, you can use those. Something that a lot of fantasy writers use, or authors in general, is they look around and they just take names like Puff's Lotion or Anime or Channel or Deluxe, and they break the name up into different things. So for instance, Deluxe could be D, or you could use Lux, or you could use Elux, or Z or Ooks, whatever. You could come up with different names just by looking at the things that are already presented in that word. So a lot of authors use that. And one more thing to think about when you're doing names is that no name is really stupid. a lot of names can sound stupid, and if you think that you have a really cool name that you really appreciate, but you don't think other people will find them serious, as long as the people inside of your fiction, inside of your story, take that name seriously, other people will take it seriously too. For example, in the Provokers, the big baddie is called the Corruptor, right? And the Corruptor is such a simple name. However, because of how serious people take it, because of how serious of a threat he is, and because of how serious Matt Click plays that character up, everybody else takes it seriously. And you, as the watcher and the viewer, also take it seriously. So just something to keep in mind. Your name doesn't have to be complex or weird sounding. It could be super simple like the Corruptor, and, that's that. So that's all 4 steps, and like always, here's a really quick example. So the example I'm going to give you guys is from my new setting called Sunder. So, I'm running a panel at BrigadeCon on October 10th. BrigadeCon, check it out. And it's going to be a tour through my setting called Sunder. It's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right after the Roll Up and Die panel that has Matt Click, Barker from Be a Better Game Master. By the way, Matt Click is from Fistful of Dice, which I'm sure everybody knows. And Captain Gothnog, I think. I could be wrong. I hope I'm getting all those guys right. So, yeah, right after their panel is mine, and then I'm running a game after that. So, here's the example. When I started creating this setting, I wanted to have all the gods kind of be together. I wanted them all to come down, and I wanted them to come down because of like a game that they're playing. And I wanted them to have all been tricked into playing this game, so I wanted a god to have tricked all the other gods into coming down and playing this game. So that would be the first step, giving that god a purpose, and his purpose is to trick the other gods and to also act as a referee once they come down to the mortal realm. So when I was thinking about what role I wanted him to do or what aspects I wanted him to have, I wanted him to be a typical trickster god. However, I also wanted him to be a god of secrets. I wanted him to be a god that people wouldn't just instantly think he was manipulating them. I wanted him to be knowledgeful. So I wanted him to be also the god of knowledge, but a different type of god of knowledge. Like, he's not in the progression of knowledge. He's in the keeping of knowledge. So he's like the god of secrets. So he's a god of knowledge, but the god of secret knowledge. So what he would do is he would go and get knowledge of all the other gods, like kind of like blackmail them and forcing them to do what he wants them to do by manipulating them. Finding out things that they like, things they don't like, things they did that they should never have done. Pretty much he had enough information on all the gods and all the things that he was able to trick them all into going and doing what he wanted them to do. But he was also influential enough that they all took the time to listen to him. So, as far as personality goes, as the god of secrets, he rewards those who go out and find secrets for him or finds information as agents for him with secrets of his own. So he shares information with those who work for him and, helps people gain advantages in those type of ways. So, for example, if you're a king or something like that and you really need to get the leg up, you might worship this god to know what's happening, in advance. The way his relationship with other gods, like I said, is that of kind of manipulation. On the mortal plane at the moment, he's kind of known as like the referee of the match, in the fact that all the gods have kind of signed their lives over to him. So if they play the game in the wrong way, he has the right to kill them flat out, erase them from existence. So a lot of the gods are actually terrified of him. Now, people in general are also terrified of him, because if the gods themselves are terrified of this guy, then obviously you as a mortal shouldn't cross him at all. So with that, you can kind of get a sense that he's a very serious god, very confident in what he does, and he rewards those who work for him, but do not cross him. Don't if you don't worship him, if you don't follow him, it's best to stay out of his way. Let him do what he wants to do and don't get in his way. So what did I name this guy? So I was trying to think of a cool name, and what I decided was nobody would know what his name is. The gods probably wouldn't know what his name is, and the people wouldn't know what his name is, because he probably wouldn't take one, or he probably wouldn't offer it. So what everyone knows him as is they know him as the eye, the watcher, or the knowing. You know, they know him as these very vague ideas, not really a name. He's more of like a representation of something, you know, of something that is always looming, always watching, always knowing. Like he's always there. That's kind of what his name represents. And yeah, so that's it. This has been the first video in my Divine series. I hope you guys appreciate it. I hope you guys like the Aeronox shirt. I was super excited that it came in the mail the other day. But yeah, have a good day, guys. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and if you have a video that or a topic in mind that you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to get to it. Alright, guys, have a good night.